Well, welcome, viewers and listeners, to CHP Talks. We're here for another exciting interview, this time with Brian Atherton, who is a director of the Bulkley Valley Rod and Gun Club here in the beautiful Bulkley Valley in northern BC. Brian, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, Rod, thanks very much for the invitation. I mean, it's nice to be asked to give some information to the public so that they can have a greater understanding of what some of the issues are, as opposed to just hearing sort of a government side.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, we do live in the beautiful Bulkley Valley up in northern British Columbia, and Brian has lived in the greater Bulkley Valley area since 1979, first in the Hazeltons for 17 years, and since 1995 in Smithers. He retired in 2009 from a 37-year career, mainly focused on wildlife management with the BC Forest Service. He's married to Carla. They have 4 adult children, and they raise their family with the belief that all of us have a responsibility for the social and economic health of the place that we call home. To that end, he's volunteered for many organizations over the years, from parent advisory committees, Chamber of Commerce, 2 Mile Community Association, director of the Royal Canadian Legion, Rotary Club, and most ardently over the last 8 years, the Bulkley Valley Rod and Gun Club. And he's currently serving as the director of the Rod and Gun Club, but during his time as president, he was part of a team that moved the club forward from 90 to 350 members, which is a pretty significant achievement. Shooting sports and hunting have always been important to him, and he has become very disappointed in a government that seems to care more about optics than taking effective action to solve root causes of the issues that plague parts of this country. He continues to express how fortunate he is to live in this beautiful part of Canada, and he stresses the need to preserve existing privileges that we as citizens and responsible firearms users currently enjoy. So again, Brian, thank you for being here. It was great meeting with you a couple of weeks ago out at the range at the Rod and Gun Club. And I really enjoyed, my wife and I enjoyed that chat with you and some of the other folks there. And I thought other people need to hear what you have to say. So maybe I'll just let you start off with whatever you want to say at the beginning, and then I've got some questions to put to you.
Sure. Well, Rod, it was that was Range Day Canada that you popped out, and we certainly had a turnout of club members to come out and enjoy the camaraderie and the enjoyment of the shooting sports. So obviously didn't take in the hunting side there, but everybody who's hunting often goes to the range first to make sure that their sights are all set up, and then when they are out on the hunt, they can be effective and responsible to the animals that they're targeting. But that was just a small event, actually, in comparison to what we've done over the last 3 weeks. We've had a couple elementary school groups there, a total of 59 kids. And in the 2 events that we had those kids, we went through 2,500 rounds of 22 ammunition. So, and I make it fun, I make it fun, but first and foremost, it's safe and responsible, and then it's fun. So the kids get taught all those basics. And it's just like everything, well, it's like anything in life, whether it's a sport or if you're just teaching your children to be good citizens, whatever, it all comes down with good education, demonstration of how things should be done, what the effects of things are. For example, if a bullet were to go astray, that could be of significant consequence. So we do a great job with the kids. The elementary schools approach us, and any elementary school teacher who's listening in the Bulkley Valley area, we would welcome your classes to attend as well. Generally speaking, a grade 6 and 7 age group, but certainly could do high schools for sure as well. So that's, for me, that's the real part of getting down to the shooting sports, the sheer joy of being able to take a tool, a firearm in this case, and be able to send a projectile down the range to the intended target precisely and accurately on the spot, and over again. So that takes patience, it takes timing, it takes equipment, practice, all of those things. So we want to get the youth involved in first learning the safe and responsible use, and then seeing the joy out of what all of that is. So on that front, when a government comes in and starts attempting to enact new laws, that I have a very difficult time as seeing as being effective for the intended purpose of that law. And in the case that we'd be talking about here in Canada most recently, the law would be the proposed legislation called Bill C-21, where they want to have certain restrictions on magazine capacity, certain restrictions, well, essentially banning handguns, the sale, transfer, loan, import or whatever of that. And really, for me, especially as a long-term member of the Bulkley Valley Broad and Gun Club, a past president, a director, I see this as a real threat to the long-term survivability of the Broad and Gun Club. Many of your listeners won't know if they're not involved in the shooting sports or hunting. We have very strict rules already in Canada, and we need to enforce them. Anybody who breaks them, they should be enforced and feel the full sanction and weight of the law. That's fine. We all support that. But what this will do is it would appear the freezing of handgun sales, it might not get the right target audience. There seems to be in Canada, we do have a problem with handgun use in some of the larger cities, and it seems to be persons known to the police. So I'll let people draw their own conclusion what category or sector of our society that involves. But generally speaking, actually, I'd say specifically speaking, it's not the law-abiding firearms owner that's causing that problem.
Yeah, and I understand generally the handguns used in a violent assault are not ones that have been purchased legally and responsibly, but are through the black market, maybe smuggled over the border, all kinds of ways that they get into the wrong hands. But certainly punishing this debate has been going on for decades now. Some people feel that the only way to make things safe is to get rid of the guns. Of course, then a violent criminal can use other forms of weaponry. They're using vans to drive into crowds and various things like that. Knives are a pretty common element, and it's impossible to make our society completely free of any item that could possibly hurt somebody. It'd be a lot better if people were properly trained, motivated, and guided by internal principles of, love your neighbor as yourself and don't do things that hurt other people, right? So,
well, Rod, as I look at the map behind you, and of course, we share a very large border with the United States, the longest undefended border, or, really unsecure border, shall we say, in the world. And we're a neighbor with a very I'm going to say a gun friendly. It's not the term I really want to use, but there's a different firearms culture in the United States than there is in Canada. So we're all firearms. I'll just lump it. If all firearms were to be banned in Canada, it's very simple matter to get them across the border to those who would do harm with them. So, and I recently spoke with our member of parliament, Taylor Backrack, and one of the things I emphasized, and this comes from my career with the Forest Service, I was involved in accident investigation. And one of the main theories behind, or credos behind accident investigation, is looking at the root cause of the accident. It's not just that the accident occurred. What are the factors that led up to it? And I would propose to many of the people listening today, and I encourage them to think about this. If we see firearms violence in the larger cities, and most of us do watch the news, we're appraised of some of those things that do occur. What's the root cause of that? Is it mental health issues? I would suggest there's certainly that. When we have an individual taking a firearm to somewhere and shooting a number of people, I would support that there's either a mental health issue, a substance abuse issue. There's something there. There's a root cause that caused that to happen. And getting back to your comment, Rod, I mean, they could choose to use a vehicle. They could choose to use a knife, a machete. There's all sort of manner of people who are misguided in their beliefs of ways to perpetrate harm on other people. So unfortunately, we can't outlaw mental health issues. We can't we certainly are not going to outlaw some of the things that create substance abuse issues, but what we can do is we can put programs in place to assist people with mental health issues. We could have substance abuse programs and substance prevention programs, so we can start working at the root cause of some of these issues. That then, the 2.2 million registered PAL owners. So for those that don't know, that's a possession and acquisition license holder. Canada has about 37 million people. There's 2.2 million PAL holders. Now, if you remove the people who are too young to be able to get a PAL, so now the percentages of PALs in the adult population shifts dramatically when you remove, say, the too young, for example, or people who couldn't otherwise have one. So we can continue with training. I showed MP Backrack the PAL manual. It's 347 pages long. That covers both the general firearms license for long gun as well as the handgun restricted firearms license. So everybody in Canada, I would hesitate, or I'm sad to say that I have to reiterate this again. The gun laws and culture between Canada and the United States are significantly different. MP Backrack didn't quite grasp that. He questioned that. And I said, there's very little question. The gun laws in Canada versus the United States are vastly different. The culture around firearms between the two countries is essentially very different. So we have robust laws now. We need to enforce those laws and be effective in enforcing them. Again, if people watch the news, I encourage you to listen to the point where they talk about a repeat offender. You know, listen for those key words that talk about this person has already once, twice, three times been in the justice system, but somehow they managed to keep doing things wrong. So if they keep doing things wrong, what is it that we are doing wrong?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's right. We have a real problem in the country that, guns aside, like even if there were no such thing as firearms, we have a problem with recidivism, and the criminal element. I think, you know, I look at it, it starts at a very young age. And you can go back, if you're looking at root causes, you can go back to fatherless homes, an education system that maybe doesn't focus on, you know, our responsibility to each other, but more on,
Right.
you know, what's in it for me. Sometimes there's that idea that we just do the best for ourselves, and but people are growing up. Some young people are growing up without a really good understanding of what a privilege it is to live in this country, what it took to get here. You know, like the men and women who laid the groundwork for the freedoms and privileges we
Right.
enjoy and the
Yes.
prosperity. And, you know, when people aren't aware that the obligation they have, the moral obligation to their fellow citizens, I mean, anything's possible then. People reach out, they've been hurt, they've been injured in situations. Drug abuse, certainly, as you mentioned, is an element. So I really like what you've shared about, you know, teaching responsible gun ownership to young people, the use and, you know, care and safety element of using a gun properly, because a lot of people are afraid of guns as such, and they, you know, we certainly need a healthy respect for what a gun can do in the wrong hands or with carelessness. However, as the same goes for a chainsaw or you know, a table saw, there are tools that people need to be properly trained in their use. And so I think a people that grows up with an understanding that a firearm is something you need to handle with care and respect is a lot better than people that are just afraid of them. So the political aspect of it, I mean, that's sort of the concern. One of the concerns I certainly wanted to touch on. Prime Minister was just in California just before he came down with COVID again, and said that that in Canada a firearm could not be used in self-defense, and that I mean, I think you would agree, and most owners would agree, they don't purchase a firearm for use against another person. But
Correct.
we do, as citizens, have the right to self-defense. It's a natural that before the Charter of Rights and Freedoms was ever dreamed of. This is a natural human right if you're attacked to defend yourself however you can. And so it was kind of a statement. He was pointing out, as you have, the difference in culture between the U.S., where they have the Second Amendment, and it's clearly stated the right to bear arms. But he kind of went. I thought he went a little too far in that, saying it could not be.
Well, Rod, just commenting on that self-defense. I mean, you're right. Were somebody to attack me in my home, I don't care if I hit them with a frying pan, or a knitting needle, or whatever. It doesn't matter. A wet blanket, whatever's at hand, I would use to defend myself. But I think your listeners really need to appreciate that in Canada, again, with our robust laws, there are very stringent safe storage laws. Like in Canada, if you were a handgun owner, it cannot legally be beside your bed. It must be locked and secure and separate from ammunition. So the opportunity to use it for self-defense is probably not there anyway, if it's a very sudden sort of event that occurs.
Right. Yeah.
If it's a lengthy sort of thing and one had the opportunity, I think, as you say, you would use whatever tools and means possible to defend yourself and your family. Who wouldn't do that? Yeah. Look what a mama bear would do to defend her cubs. It's no different. Whatever tools come to hand. However, people do need to understand that the safe storage requirements, the separation from ammunition, trigger locks, or gun cabinets, gun safes, that sort of thing, really in a very dynamic situation would preclude a firearm being used for self-defense. So, it's markedly different between us and the United States on the availability of a firearm, unless you are a criminal who has open access to doing whatever you want, because the penalties in Canada are not as severe as the government leads you to believe. And I would encourage people. In British Columbia, currently, there's some talk about getting rid of the RCMP and going to a provincial police force, as people are a little bit sort of saddened by the fact they keep seeing people out in the street doing the same thing over and over again. I recently interviewed a member of the RCMP here in Smithers, and my comment to him was that people should go sit in the courtroom and see what the justice system does with these people. And basically, if I were to break the law, and let's say I owned $30,000 worth of firearms and related equipment, and everybody should understand there's reloading, there's scopes, there's gun cases, there's all sorts of ancillary things that go with firearms. But if I was to break the law, all of that would be confiscated. I would lose thousands of dollars with very little recourse. However, a criminal who's been arrested 2 and 3 times already, they have nothing to lose. They can go out and get another firearm because of the smuggling potential between the two countries. And smuggling can be very profitable for those who are in the criminal element.
Yeah.
A much different scene between the two countries. And we are, I tried to impress upon MP Bacharach that I said, Taylor, most people believe Canadians are very safe, responsible, polite people. We're known that way around the world. Why are we constantly, by our own government, thrown into the loop of being these evil owners of these evil things? And I speak loud and clear to most firearms owners, like, nobody wants to see any firearms crime. Nobody wants to see any firearms accidents. Nobody wants to see anything stolen and used by somebody for improper purposes. We want safe, responsible, ethical use at all times. I tried to impress upon him, and I don't want to rally on here and stop you from asking other questions, but I tried to impress upon him when I'm trying to hit a golf ball off a fence post at the range in a safe spot, and I'm standing there with a .22 rifle or whatever I'm choosing, and this little tiny golf ball 100 meters away, when I can hit that, that's the same feeling that a golfer gets when he gets that hole in one. It's a sport. It's trying to get something from A to B precisely, and The kids that I had out in the range, we had one young fella, he'd never held a firearm before. We had 2 golf balls on a stump about 40 meters away. You should have seen the look on his face when he knocked those off the stump.
Yeah.
It was just priceless.
Yeah.
And they learned, again, I can't emphasize enough, the safe, responsible use of firearms was drilled into those kids. And I think, we've got 50, 60 more kids in the valley that are going to be safe users of firearms in the future.
Yeah, excellent. So do you mind me asking what Mr. Bachrach's response was? Does he intend to support this bill C-21, or is he still in thinking about it? Where would you say he's at? Right
Well,
now?
I couldn't say that I teased that out of him, that he would support it. He seemed to infer, and Taylor, if you're watching, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but he seemed to infer he was more on a fact-finding mission. He just wanted to understand what some of the issues were. When I spoke to the drugs and gang shootings in the Lower Mainland, and I said, it's my understanding as a common sense guy who watches the news that that's the majority of the incidents. So I said, I don't have statistics to back that up, but I think most people watching the news, the fairly regular shootings in some of the larger cities, and when the police say it was a targeted hit and the public should not be concerned that they're at risk. He said, really, do you think that's a problem? And I looked at him in amazement. I said, you're an intelligent human being. You're telling me you don't watch the news and you can't see that as being the major problem? Yeah. And making more laws for the law abiding is going to do nothing to solve that. So
yeah.
Rod, I would love to say that he was on board supporting, but I think everybody is listening, and whatever your concerns are, whether it's about firearms or homelessness or whatever, you should contact your MP, because, and I'm going to point at everybody when I'm doing this, if you don't do it, who is?
Exactly.
If we don't hold the politicians to account to do the things that will create real change, then they get away with just keep making optics kind of changes.
Yeah. Well, they are there to represent their constituents. And
yes,
unfortunately, partisan discipline or, party discipline, yes, and exactly, the tendency of many politicians to just follow their leader, regardless of where they're going. And now that the NDP has tied themselves to the Liberal government in an awkward way, it seems like there has been a willingness just to throw aside personal convictions and just go with what Mr. Trudeau says. And Mr. Trudeau is not someone that many of us feel a lot of confidence in, especially in areas of health and safety, and that can go in a lot of directions. But BC is just embarking on a trial program of legalizing or decriminalizing, yes, all drugs, including the ones that have ruined so many people's lives. And Mr. Trudeau is all on board with that. He sees BC as a training ground, experimental ground for that. I think it's going to end in disaster. And those are the very kinds of people that you don't want them getting their hands on guns of any sort. So.
Yeah, the decriminalization, I mean, that's not an area of my expertise, so I can't really comment on that. But my comment would generally be that, making new laws, I'm going to say essentially doesn't cost any money. You could say effective today, all handguns in Canada are banned. And that law essentially costs nothing to create. So I'm maybe undermining what it really costs, but as opposed to saying we're going to spend $500 million on treatment facilities or $1 billion on treatment facilities or $500 million on increased border security or more money in schools to, get more children involved in sports, healthy sort of pursuits, and whether that's golfing or tennis or badminton or the shooting sports, whatever. Many schools in the past, Rod, used to have firearms programs right in the schools. A lot of schools had, and even today, have hunter safety training courses within the school, perhaps as an elective or an after school sort of add-on for the students. But the more we can educate people, and those who have strayed from the path, those who have had a difficult situation, whether that's a mental health issue or a substance abuse issue, we need to help them. And that costs money. You can't do it. You can't help those people by just passing a new law that says we're removing X, Y, and Z out of our Canadian content.
Yeah.
So money needs to be spent.
Yeah. One of the aspects of the political side, and then I want to talk about another thing that your Rod and Gun Club does there. But one of the aspects is the Prime Minister using orders in council, which is basically his cabinet getting together and deciding, rather than a decision being made by the elected parliament. And of course, now he's got the NDP kind of pulled under his wing on this as well. But the orders in council is a way of things being passed without really any vetting by the elected representatives. And so do you have any comments about that? Because he's using it now for firearms regulations.
Well, certainly, Rod, I reflect back over the past couple of years, and you're right. A couple of years ago, he did that very exact thing with the long guns, and he banned what started out as 1,500 types, variants, and then it went up to 1,800s. He did that, and it caused a major upheaval in the legal firearms community. There was a lot of retailers now caught with inventory that they couldn't sell. They couldn't export back out of the country. I'm not entirely sure what happened. But to just do that out of the blue, and of course, that was based on the tragedy that, I believe anyway, based on the tragedy that happened in Nova Scotia, by smuggled firearms, by someone with mental health issues, and the list goes on and on. So it did nothing, or did very little in terms of what the intent was, but the optics appeared to be wonderful. We've taken all these firearms away from Canadians. And recently, I was most aghast earlier this year when similar sort of procedure happened with the Emergencies Act. And it amazed me in this country that by donating to something that I believed in, my bank account could be seized. Yeah. I was just, how, and Mr. Prime Minister, if you're listening, how in God's green earth could you come up with that in a democracy? And then travel the world and talk about democracies, and we got to watch about the slippage of democracies when he was vilified for being the champion of moving away from democracy. So I'm horrified by that, Rod, and that should not happen.
Yeah, no, and you're absolutely correct. We had as our guest last week another Brian, Mr. Brian Peckford, the former Premier of Newfoundland, one of the signers and drafters of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and he is up in arms, not with firearms, but he is very, feeling intense internal pressure to do something about it, because he said if we lose our freedoms, then we don't have the Canada that we love and
we thought we have. Yeah. Rod, and I, sorry to jump in again. It's my nature, type A personality.
Go ahead.
I volunteered for a lot of things in my life because I believe in the social and economic health of our community. When my children in school, I was on a parent advisory committee. The Royal Canadian Legion. I've been a Legion member for 36 years probably now. I was a director there. I was in Rotary, because that's all, it's business people getting together to do good things for their community.
Right.
The Rod and Gun Club, again, if you look at the culture of our community and the culture of MP Backrack's riding, we're largely a rural culture, and we are very much engaged in hunting, fishing, outdoor activities. So I would hope he would, as we said earlier, represent his constituents, not what he's told by the party boss to vote for. So all of these things, and I would encourage people, like, join the Rod and Gun Club, join things that are good for children. The Boy Scouts, the Girl Guides these days are all looking for support and leadership. And it doesn't matter, it could be the soccer club or kids hockey or whatever. We need to pool together as a small community that we are, realize, as you said earlier, how lucky we are to live in the Bulkley Valley, but it doesn't just happen. It has to be vigorously pursued. We need people with enthusiasm to stand up and work together with other citizens to preserve what we have. And again, whether that's the firearms rights and privileges that we have, or that we have good wildlife management or whatever.
Yeah,
So,
one of the events you host annually at the Rod and Gun Club is the Wild Game Dinner, and I've
yes.
been privileged to be there a couple of times, and what an array of exotic tastes
Exactly.
and presentation. But even more than that is the people getting together, the hunters, fishermen, and friends of hunters and fishermen who get together to enjoy that great evening. And obviously it's people who love wildlife. We live in a culture, a society where we eat meat, most of us anyway.
Absolutely,
And we do appreciate the wildlife around us. I mean, we occasionally have a moose on our front doorstep here, or on our yard, or a bear.
Yeah.
We've had a bear on our front porch here, and we appreciate seeing them. But they also make great eating.
Well, Rod, the Rod and Gun Club, it was formed initially in 1926. So we're approaching our 100th year anniversary in only a few years. Our motto, and I think this is really important for people to understand, like, it's not just a gun club, it's a fish and wildlife club that has ranges so the firearms can be used there safely and responsibly. But our motto is protect to enjoy. So again, this talks about that collective energy of a group of people who value the fish and wildlife resources that we have. And protect to enjoy means, it doesn't matter if you love seeing the moose in your backyard, or you love seeing the moose parceled up and put on the dinner table, or that you can go out hiking and see mountain goats in the distance and take pictures. If we don't work together to protect them, none of us are going to enjoy them in any way. And I have to jump in with a story from a wildlife biologist here in Smithers. This was a number of years ago when I was interviewing him, and they were doing a wild sheep study up in the northwest part of the province. And he said, sort of just casually, he says, "Oh yeah, we got the money from the Wild Sheep Foundation." I said, "Hang on." I said, "So if you didn't get money from the Wild Sheep Foundation, would there be any study on sheep at all?" And he said, "Without the support of the Wild Sheep Foundation, there would be no studies on wild sheep." So again, joining our Rod and Gun Club, joining things, whatever those things are, could be soccer, doesn't matter. They're only going to be looked after if we passionately choose to look after them and not just leave it to others being, and I'm not saying anything negative about anybody in the fish and wildlife sectors, whatever, but the government who allocates the funds and resources to them to do their job, we need to be very passionate about following up on that. So, and that could be your local MLA, or of course your member of parliament for other things.
Very good. Well, when you were saying protect to enjoy, it made me think we need to protect our rights and freedoms so that our children can enjoy them in the future, as well as the prosperity, the beautiful environment we live in, the beautiful wildlife we have around us, and our beautiful community, the good men and women who make up our community. So, Brian, it's been a real treat and pleasure to have you with us today, right in our own Bulkley Valley. And could you give a couple of maybe links, URLs, or names of organizations that people who want to help protect firearms ownership, hunting and shooting sports, that they could look up online?
Yeah. I'm a member of another number of organizations. And of course, that's my belief that if you're not part of moving things forward, then, you're not stepping up to the plate. So one of them in Canada is the Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights. And that was formed, I'm only going to say like 5 years ago or so, and a very well respected organization in Canada. So the Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights. There's the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. I'm also a member of that. And again, it's Shooting Sports Association. You know, it's not so I can go wandering out in the bush shooting up everything and, you know, whatever. It's so that I can enjoy the shooting sports, and of course, as well as the hunting and fishing sides. The Bulkley Valley Rod and Gun Club itself here in the Bulkley Valley, and for people who are listening greater than just out of the Bulkley Valley, there are shooting clubs or fishing game associations or wildlife clubs throughout the province, and they can look those up locally. But the Bulkley Valley Rod and Gun Club is just BVGC.ca, I think. But again, Google Bulkley Valley Rod and Gun Club. Memberships are available through that online, as with those other organizations. And here in Smithers, we have some great retail facilities like Outdoor Essentials, been very supportive of the club. A lot of the ammunition that I referred to that those youth were shooting was donated by Outdoor Essentials. We have McBike and Sport also on Main Street, a very great supporter of the club. And membership applications could be picked up at either of those locations too. So
Excellent. Well, Brian Atherton, it's great speaking with you today, and I look forward to seeing you again out on the range, out at the Rod and Gun Club facility in the beautiful Bulkley Valley. Thank you for sharing your insights with our viewers and listeners, and may the Lord give you many more years of being able to work with young people in our area and training them in the safe and effective use of firearms.
And Rod, thank you very much for allowing me to take this time to encourage people in Canada to look at responsible, ethical, common sense rules and laws, and respect those that we already have that are very stringent as it is. So Rod, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, and God bless you.